It's the 1st of April, April Fool's Day. I have no pranks or jokes for you, but here's something I can share, something I read on social media. It said, we won't come up with April Fool's Day pranks because real life is playing way too many tricks already. We are in the year 2022 and there's a war on. One country is invading another. The Wuhan virus is ravaging its home country. An Indian-American diplomat is threatening India in India. And India's neighbours are sinking in crises. Pakistan may not have a prime minister by the time we start our show on Monday. Sri Lanka is battling its worst ever economic crisis. They're running out of electricity, fuel, food, medicines, paper. It's not just an economic crisis anymore, it's turning into a humanitarian crisis. Hospitals are putting off surgeries because they do not have power. People are being arrested for protesting. It could soon become a political crisis too. The powerful monks of Sri Lanka have spoken against the government. What does it mean for the Rajapaksas? Will this crisis spell the end of their government? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss. The Rajapaksas were Sri Lanka's most powerful family. They're now in the eye of a storm. What you just saw happen last night, hundreds marched to Gotabaya Rajapaksa's private residence. He is the president of Sri Lanka. Let me show you what happened next. There was total chaos. The protesters clashed with the police fired tear gas, they could not control the crowd, the protesters stormed through the barricades, they even set a bus on fire. And this is a massive shift in sentiment, a blow for the Rajapaksas. They swept to power with a majority in 2019. Look at what they face today. These people want them gone. They're angry. Their country is going through its worst economic crisis ever, and the people are blaming the Rajapaksas for this. Until a few months ago, no one dared question their authority. Last night's protest was a rare moment of defiance. And what a moment. So will this economic crisis spell the end of the Rajapaksas? On Gravitas tonight, that's what we'll talk about. First, let's tell you how grave the situation is on the ground. Sri Lanka is struggling. And that's an understatement. There are 13-hour-long power cuts. Street lights are being turned off to save electricity. Hospitals are running out of medicines. There is a shortage of diesel. At least 4 people have died just waiting for fuel in queues. Sri Lanka's inflation has skyrocketed. Retail inflation has crossed 17%. Food inflation more than 25%. Daily essentials have become unaffordable. Last weekend, the price of a gas cylinder shot up to 4,200 Sri Lankan rupees. That's more than $14 US dollars. A kilo of sugar sold for 130 Sri Lankan rupees in October 2020. It now sells for more than 200. Milk powder is now priced at almost 1,600 rupees a kilo. Now, these numbers may look small in dollar terms, but for the average Sri Lankan, it's a lot of money to shell out for essentials. They're struggling to make ends meet. The public anger has been simmering for a while, and now it has exploded. Take a look at this.
I am not a burden to this government. I am well off, but I have no use for my wealth. Although I have money, I can't buy anything. I can't pump petrol. I can't get gas when my gas canister empties. I think this is the darkest period in this country. We can't do anything with our money. What our leaders are doing is killing us without killing us.
The people you just heard were among those who protested last night. At least 54 of them were detained. The charges against them are unclear. The president is calling them extremists. The Rajapaksa government claims an extremist group organized these protests. Guess who is countering them? The monks. The Buddhist monks who have been the political backbone of the Rajapaksas. This is what they said today.
The president allowed for the protest to take place peacefully, but it turned out violent in the end. After the violence, what the president is saying is that we must go to the IMF and solve this, because when we, as citizens, go to obtain a loan, they ask for 2 guarantors. So in the same way, when a country asks for a loan, they ask for guarantors. We are drowning in debt, so we don't have guarantors coming forward on our behalf at the moment. That is why the president believed financial assistance from other countries would help us come out of this situation instead. Until then, we must be patient.
We're drowning in debt. We don't have any guarantors. These words should worry the government. Buddhist monks are a very powerful group in Sri Lanka. They have influence over Sinhalese Buddhists. They're a core vote bank of the Rajapaksas. They make up 75% of Sri Lanka's population, the Sinhalese Buddhists. In the 2019 election, the monks propelled the Rajapaksas to victory. And now they sound unhappy, criticizing the government over its handling of the economy. 2 monks have also written a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. This letter has 14 suggestions and one key demand: ease the economic suffering, provide relief to the people of Sri Lanka. At the center of this firestorm is this man, Basil Rajapaksa, the finance minister of Sri Lanka, also a brother of the president and the prime minister. He is being blamed for driving Sri Lanka's economy into the ground. Critics say they saw it coming though. Basil Rajapaksa's reputation precedes him. In the past, he's been accused of corruption and embezzlement. His detractors call him Mr. 10%. They say he demands a 10% commission for every project. This was part of a WikiLeaks report. It was based on a US diplomatic cable from 2007. I had that cable with me, and this is what the then American ambassador to Sri Lanka wrote about Basil Rajapaksa. Let me quote from the cable. Embassy contacts say Basil has no close advisors and more enemies than friends in Sri Lanka because he makes a habit of trying to buy people. Basil worked for the Ministry of Mahaveli Development, where he earned the nickname Mr. 10% for demanding a 10% commission on every project. Basil continues to be accused of significant corruption in his current position. This is what the US ambassador wrote back in 2007. Now this same man, Basil Rajapaksa, will lead the bailout talks. Reports say he will travel to Washington, D.C. next month. Colombo is in talks with both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Sri Lanka needs help from both these agencies. Its foreign debt has ballooned to $51 billion. And this year alone, Sri Lanka has to pay back at least $7 billion. They don't have this money. They're barely making ends meet, running out of essentials, running short of money for essentials. Recently, India gave a $1.5 billion credit line to Sri Lanka. This was to buy fuel. Colombo has now sought another credit line of $1 billion. This is for the import of essential goods. Quick question. Where is China in all of this? For the longest time, the Rajapaksas banked on China. So what is China now doing to help Sri Lanka? Not very much. China has turned its back on Sri Lanka, it seems. Colombo made 2 requests to Beijing. The first one was a credit line of $2.5 billion. The second one was to restructure its overall debt. Change the terms of the debt so that payment becomes easier. There's no default. China has not agreed to either. No commitment so far. You know how much money Sri Lanka owes China? More than $10 billion. It's a very difficult situation. Credit lines can only help you so far. The way out is a bailout, and Sri Lanka needs it fast. Delaying a bailout only raises the risk of more violence, more instability. The economic crisis is morphing into a humanitarian crisis, and Sri Lanka needs urgent help. Across the strait, there is a different sort of buzz in India, the buzz of diplomacy. First to arrive were the Western diplomats. They came to lobby for India's support in Ukraine. In simple words, they failed. Because the West brought its favorite cocktail, equal parts of threats and lectures. This disaster set the stage for India's second guest, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He arrived in New Delhi on Thursday, and today he got down to business. Lavrov's first meeting was with his Indian counterpart, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. They had a lot to talk about: Afghanistan, Iran, the Indo-Pacific, but needless to say, the big focus was Ukraine. Lavrov's second meeting was with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Apparently, he was carrying a personal message from Vladimir Putin. Now, this meeting has a special significance. In the last 2 weeks, 5 foreign ministers have visited New Delhi from Austria, Greece, China, Britain, and Russia. 5. Only the Russian foreign minister got an audience with Prime Minister Modi, and that tells you how much New Delhi has invested in its relationship with Moscow. The Russian foreign minister had twin missions in Delhi, one to say thank you. Unlike the West, India is not dealing in rhetoric. It is looking for a solution, and Lavrov appreciated this position by New Delhi.
Indeed, as you mentioned, this day our Western colleagues would like to reduce any meaningful international issue to the crisis in Ukraine. You know our position. We do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation in the entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way.
Mission number 2 is trickier, convincing India to do more business with Russia. And on this, Lavrov was categorical. Anything India wants to buy, Russia is ready to sell. Listen in.
I mentioned about oil supplies and supplies of high technology. If India wants to buy anything from us, we are ready to discuss and to reach mutually acceptable forms of cooperation.
You see, Russia is desperate. They badly need a new market for their energy, and they're hoping India will step up. Now, just to be clear, India has not taken up any of these offers. Rupee, ruble, oil discounts, all of them are under consideration. They've not signed on the dotted line. But then came Dalip Singh. He is America's Deputy National Security Advisor. Slick hair, broad smile, and zero understanding of foreign policy. Dalip Singh thought the best way to sway India was using threats. Let me read out what he said. The more leverage that China gains over Russia, the less favorable that is for India. I don't think anyone would believe that if China once again breached the line of actual control, that Russia would come running to India's defense. Well, here's a question for Mr. Diplomacy, Dalip Singh. Did America come running to India's defense? The answer is no. India fought alone for her territorial integrity. Just like Ukraine is fighting right now. In both cases, America just gave moral support and nothing more. By the way, Dalip Singh did not stop there. He had another warning for India, this time on buying Russian oil. Let me read out what he said. What we would not like to see is a rapid acceleration of India's imports from Russia as it relates to energy or any other exports that are currently being prohibited by the US or by other aspects of the international sanctions regime. Now, two possibilities here. One, Dalip Singh is out of his depth. He's talking about things that are way over his pay grade. Or two, America is changing its strategy. Perhaps India's neutrality is making them impatient. Either way, this is not going to help the Western campaign. India's neutrality is based on national interest, on independent thinking. Threats and lectures will not make things better. They will only make things worse. Also, think about the audacity. Europe continues to buy Russian gas. Nobody says a thing. But India scoops up discounted oil and suddenly there are threats and lectures. S. Jaishankar talked about this hypocrisy on Thursday. He said it looks like a campaign against India.
We've seen for some time what looks almost like a campaign on this issue. Now, I was just reading a report today that in the month of March, Europe has bought, I think, 15% more oil and gas from Russia. We ourselves get the bulk of our energy supplies from the Middle East, about 7.5%, 8% of our oil from the US. In the past, maybe less than 1% from Russia. When oil prices go up, I think it's natural for countries to go out into the market and look for what are good deals for their people.
Both Russia and the West need to understand one thing. India's foreign policy is not for sale. You cannot threaten India into criticizing Russia. Neither can you lure India with cheap oil. Just think about it. As we speak, Russia is waging a war over so-called national interests. America has done the same for decades. Why should India be any different? If you want to sway New Delhi, you must come up with concrete proposals. Proposals that benefit India's interests. And most importantly, try not sending novices like Dalip Singh. And talking about India's interests, trade is one of them. Russia is offering discounted goods to India, oil, gas, coking coal. Every deal is being sweetened by Moscow. And looking at this volatile market, it's a great offer. The question is, how will these purchases happen? Most Russian banks have been sanctioned. They cannot use the SWIFT payment system. Same story with foreign reserves. Half of Russia's forex has been frozen. That's around $300 billion. How does this impact trade? You see, most international trade happens in dollars. You pay in dollars, you receive in dollars. It's been like that for decades. But Russia's dollar reserves have been frozen. It cannot pay in greenbacks anymore. So what is the solution? One option is to trade in local currency. It's called the rupee-ruble system. How does that work? I'll give you a simple explanation. Russia pays in rupees, India pays in rubles. Basically, remove the dollar from the equation. I know it sounds easy, but setting up the system is hard work. Step one is coordinating between banks. Russian banks will have to open accounts in an Indian bank and vice versa. Indian banks will have to open accounts in a Russian bank. So the platform is set. Step two is holding reserves. Both sides will have to hold a certain amount of money in these accounts, say $200 million, for example. But there's a catch. This reserve cannot be held in dollars. It must be held in local currency. So in this example, Russian banks must hold the equivalent of $200 million. That's more than 1,500 crore rupees. So you've got the platform, you've got the money, now you can trade easily. This is how the rupee-ruble system would work. Russia will pay Indian exporters in rupees, India will pay Russian exporters in rubles. Has this been tried before? Yes, it has. We can think of two high-profile examples. One, during the Cold War, India and the Soviet Union traded in local currency. The idea was exactly the same, to work around Western restrictions. And two, in 2012, that's more recent. This was with Iran. And this time, India created a rupee-rial system. Iran was sanctioned by Western powers, so India began buying Iranian oil in local currency. And things were working well. Then came a certain Donald Trump. He imposed specific sanctions on Iranian oil, and so the rupee-rial trade lost momentum. You can see why Russia is pushing for this system. They desperately need to sell their oil, and right now, India is their best bet. Let me give you a sample of how desperate Russia is. They're offering a discount of $35 per barrel, and that too not on current prices. This $35 discount per barrel is on oil prices before the war. So you can imagine how lucrative this deal is. Speaking in New Delhi, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made a renewed push for rupee-ruble trade today. Listen in.
I mentioned already just about rubles and rupees. This process is ongoing for many years. And the reason for moving to national currencies is, again, absolutely unreliable nature of our Western counterparts. We don't want to depend on a system which could be closed anytime. And we don't want to depend on the system whose masters can steal your money overnight.
Which brings us to the most important question. Why hasn't India taken up the offer? If rupee-ruble has been tried before, if the discounts are so attractive, then what's stopping us? Why is India hesitating? Two reasons. Number one, the ruble's free fall. Before the war, both currencies were almost equal. 1 ruble was almost equal to 1 rupee. Now there is no stability. In early March, the ruble collapsed. 1 ruble was equal to half a rupee. It has recovered since, but you see the problem here. Suppose the rupee-ruble system is implemented. India deposits millions or billions of rubles in Russian banks. What happens next? What if the ruble collapses further? This money in the Russian bank will lose value. You can see why it's a risky affair. Reason number two is politics. Rupee-ruble is not just a financial commitment, it's a political statement. It's a declaration that India will buy more Russian goods. So how will America react to that? A few minutes back, we told you that America's Deputy National Security Advisor said what he said. He set red lines for India's imports from Russia. Such statements complicate matters. It's a question of risk versus reward. Is the cheap oil worth risking a Western backlash? So far, India has put oil first. Take a look at these numbers. In 2021, India bought 16 million barrels of oil from Russia. That's 16 million in 12 months. This year, 13 million barrels already. And we have 9 months left in this year. So as we keep saying, this is all about national interest. Why should Indians pay for a war that NATO and Russia created? Rupee-ruble may or may not go through, but India has made one thing clear. It will not sacrifice lucrative deals for someone else's war. Speaking of war, In Pakistan, the Prime Minister is fighting for survival. You know what's playing out there. A Prime Minister struggling to cling on to power. Opposition leaders are coming together to take him down. There is a supposed threat to his life. A threat letter is apparently doing the rounds. There are emotionally charged addresses on live television. And a Super Sunday the country is eagerly waiting for. In 2 days from now, Imran Khan will face a trust vote. The Pakistani Prime Minister has already declared the result. He says those who vote against him will be called traitors. Those who vote against him will be voting against Pakistan. In an exhaustive address to the nation, the former cricketer cried foreign conspiracy. American conspiracy, to be specific, before retracting. He said America was punishing him for pursuing an independent foreign policy, for flying to Russia. Now, you and I know better. Forget independent foreign policy. In Pakistan, even domestic policy is not independent. It is not shaped in Islamabad. It is decided in Rawalpindi, at the headquarters of the Pakistani army. The army has been running Pakistan for decades now. You must have heard commentators say that Pakistan is not a country with an army, but an army with a country. So where is that army now? Are they missing in action, or are they acting behind the scenes? Well, here's what we know so far. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa paid Imran Khan a visit at his home. With him was the ISI chief, Nadeem Anjum. This was on the 30th of March, the day Imran Khan was originally scheduled to address the nation. Reports say the army asked Imran Khan to not make that address. Well, we now know that he did it anyway, 1 day later though, and this was not the first meeting with the army chief during this crisis. They reportedly met on the 18th of March as well. What did Bajwa tell Imran Khan then? That the army would maintain neutrality in the no-confidence vote. That's good. But here's another way of looking at it. The army will not help Imran Khan. They will not bail him out. There are whispers in the corridors of power. The army has apparently dumped Imran Khan, the same man whom they'd picked in 2018. Experts say of all the Pakistani prime ministers, Imran Khan is the closest to the army. He, after all, is the selected PM. So why would the army try to get rid of him? Perhaps because he's been crossing the red line way too often. In 2019, Army Chief Bajwa sought a term extension, but there was a hiccup in Islamabad. The army took note. In 2021, the ISI chief was retiring. The army picked a replacement, but Imran Khan insisted that the old chief continue in office. Reports say there was a tiff over this between the Prime Minister and the army chief. This was strike two. By then, the army already had a list of complaints against Imran Khan. They were unhappy with the PTI's governance, its handling of the pandemic, and the growing distance between Islamabad and Rawalpindi. So soon after the ISI appointment fiasco, rumors of Imran Khan's exit began circulating. Then came reports that said that Imran Khan was trying to appoint a new army chief. Needless to say, this made matters worse. And what happened in the last few months has not helped Imran Khan. He burnt his bridge with Washington. He visited Russia the day the Kremlin invaded Ukraine. Ideally, it should not have bothered the army, given they themselves openly lean towards China. But experts say they wanted someone in Islamabad who at least had a hotline with the White House. Imran Khan is not that someone. He does not have the hotline. Remember, he's still waiting for Biden's phone call. It's a bit of an international joke now. So one thing's for sure, come Sunday, the army will not be neutral. Will they be backing Shehbaz Sharif then? Reports say he is the acceptable choice of the establishment now. So Bajwa is likely to be silently cheering for Sharif from the wings. Imran Khan knows the military's game all too well. He's decided to play till the last ball, he says.
नहीं उन्होंने ऑप्शंस दिए थे मुझे और वो ऑब्वियसली हमारी एस्टेब्लिशमेंट है उन्होंने ऑफ़र दी कि जी तीन चीज़ें हैं या आप अदम एतमाद का वोट चले जाएं या आप इस्तीफ़ा दे दें और या इलेक्शन हमने कहा इलेक्शन सबसे बेहतर तरीका है इस्तीफ़ा मैं कभी सोच भी नहीं सकता.
As we speak, he's spinning the foreign conspiracy theory. Reports say Pakistan summoned the US envoy. They lodged a protest. Washington has rubbished all the allegations. Ned Price is the spokesperson for the US State Department. He said there is no truth in this allegation that Washington is working with Pakistan's opposition to unseat Imran Khan.
Well, we are closely following developments in Pakistan, and we respect, we support Pakistan's constitutional process and the rule of law, but when it comes to those allegations, there is no truth to them.
I wouldn't vouch for how big of a player Washington is in this game. It's actually Imran Khan versus the army, and Sunday will decide which side wins. Pakistan watchers will likely put their money on Rawalpindi. For the moment, let's turn to China and China's Wuhan virus crisis. Shanghai's healthcare system has collapsed. Serious lapses have led to deaths of patients, and China is doing what it does best: cover up. Despite those efforts, some shocking stories have emerged. The Wuhan virus has hit elderly care hospitals. Now, here's something that you may not know. Shanghai has hundreds of such hospitals, elderly care hospitals, and now they've become Wuhan virus hotspots. You know what the official death toll for such hospitals is? 0. The local government is reporting 0 deaths. And we can tell you it's a lie. Chinese citizens are contesting these claims on social media. Recently, dead bodies were removed from a facility. At least 100 patients have tested positive here. The staff is narrating horror stories. One of them was tasked with dressing a dead body, a COVID casualty. Another staff member said he saw several cars outside a hospital. They were there to transport the dead. How many? We cannot say. No one knows for sure how many people have died. Shanghai's health system is overwhelmed. People are dying from other ailments too, or complications, because hospitals are refusing treatment. And the lapses are shocking. Last week, a nurse in Shanghai died, not from the Wuhan virus, but from asthma. The nurse was denied treatment. She was turned away by her own hospital. Do you know why? Because the emergency room was closed. Not because they were treating Wuhan virus patients. The emergency room was closed for disinfection. It's unbelievable. Another patient, a man, died due to kidney failure this week. Once again, he was denied care. His daughter took a bold decision. She decided to speak out on social media, Chinese social media, and she questioned local authorities. And I have a copy of her statement with me here. Let me tell you what she said. My father's tragic death is irreversible. I hope that his passing will prompt authorities to improve the system and ensure every patient gets timely assistance. Life-saving treatments are being denied for trivial reasons. I've got one more story. This is of a 77-year-old man. He contracted the Wuhan virus but died of kidney failure. And all of this happened at a hospital. The doctors refused to perform a dialysis. They kept moving the patient from one facility to another until he died. His son has spoken out, and I had that statement with me too. It never ever would have occurred to me that my dad would die of some people's negligence rather than the Omicron variant. This is something we still can't get over. The public anger is growing. Authorities in Shanghai are failing on every front, and they've failed to ensure care for patients. They've also failed to ensure food supplies. There is panic buying. Take a look at this. Empty shelves, long queues, people fighting for food supplies and mass hoarding. Let me assure you, these videos are not from 2020, they're from 2022. This year, they went viral last week. A hashtag is going viral on Chinese social media. It says, "It is really difficult to buy groceries in Shanghai." That's the hashtag. It's got 40 million hits on Weibo, 40 million. That's China's substitute for Twitter, Weibo. The people in Shanghai are panicking.
I'm feeling very insecure and hearing a lot of rumors on the outside, like we are short of this today and we need to rush to buy them. The price of goods is rising and the people are panicking.
I didn't think it will be so serious. Every single detailed aspect of our lives, from clothing, food, living, and commuting, has been affected by the lockdown. I'm panicking to some extent. I don't feel optimistic, to be honest.
China is witnessing its worst Wuhan virus outbreak since 2020. The rest of the world was able to manage the Omicron wave, but China is struggling because of its poor strategies and poorer vaccines. And now for the French presidential election. We are tonight talking about a presidential hopeful, Eric Zemmour. They call him France's Donald Trump. He's 63 years old, anti-migrant, anti-Muslim, anti-burqa. Zemmour hero worships Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and this is the first time he's running for president. He may not win this race, but he's a very important candidate nonetheless, and I will tell you why. His extreme right politics makes Marine Le Pen, France's far-right candidate and President Emmanuel Macron's biggest challenger, look moderate and good. Here's a report.
Who is Eric Zemmour? A quick Google search will give you a primer. Maybe even set you up for disappointment. The man is Jewish, but a Holocaust denier. His supporters are unruly. And this is how Eric Zemmour looks. He is 63 years old, he has no election experience, but now he is running for office. Zemmour rang in the election month with a visit to a market in the outskirts of Paris. He praised the workers and, for God alone knows what reason, used their early rising habits to beat Macron over his McKinsey controversy.
I came to Rungis to see the France that gets up early, the craftsmen, the morning workers, because that's the France I defend, the France I love. A far cry from either the France of the welfare state or the France of profiteers. I like the France of Rungis and not the France of Macron and McKinsey. This is the history of France. If the history of France stops, as it will stop if we continue with this immigration, then you won't have all that anymore. It will all be in disarray.
Zemmour blames migrants and Muslims for what he calls the decline of France. The man has been convicted of hate speech one too many times. The recent conviction was in January. A court found Zemmour guilty of racist hate. He has said that migrant children were thieves, killers, rapists. We should send them back. Zemmour's stand on migration and Muslims is clear. Goes without saying, his politics is far right. During a recent rally, he shared a secret with his followers.
Today at Trocadero, I have come to deliver a secret. We are the only ones to be right in this campaign. We are the only inheritors of the right who love France, the people, work, order and identity.
Time for some background now. Zemmour was a journalist. He would take pride in positioning himself against quote-unquote politically correct consensus. Over time, he became a TV commentator. He once told a woman on live TV that her parents had no right to call her Zina. The man also wants a ban on the hijab. Also a ban on names that are not French enough. Zemmour became a familiar face in 2021. That's courtesy his book tour, when he left no page unturned to promote his anti-migrant and anti-Muslim views. He also said that fears of the Wuhan virus were overblown. Now, if you are thinking Zemmour sounds like Donald Trump, then you're right. Critics call him France's Trump. But the 63-year-old thinks he has more in common with Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Why? Because Johnson too started his career in media. But that does not mean Zemmour does not aspire to be a Trump. He once told the media that Trump had, quote-unquote, succeeded in uniting the working class and the patriotic bourgeoisie. That's what I've been dreaming about for 20 years, he added. Zemmour's list of icons also includes Russian President Vladimir Putin. The presidential hopeful once said he was dreaming of having a French Putin. Will his dream come true? What are Zemmour's chances of making it to office? If polls are to be believed, Zemmour's chances of becoming president are very, very slim.
In geopolitics, everyone is a crusader. The brave knights fighting for what is right. That is until the crusade hits home. Then it's every knight for himself. Case in point, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Let me take you back to 2018. Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was brutally murdered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. His body was hacked into pieces. It was barbaric, it was cold-blooded, and we all know who did it. The intelligence trail leads to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Back then, Donald Trump was US president. He prized his relationship with the kingdom, so Trump gave MBS a free pass. But Erdogan did not. He had a long list of grudges against Saudi Arabia. Erdogan supported the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia did not. Erdogan allied himself with Qatar. Saudi and company blockaded Qatar. Erdogan also dreamt of leading the Muslim world. Again, Saudi Arabia stood in his way. All this tension boiled over in 2018. Erdogan had the perfect weapon against Riyadh: CCTV footage, intelligence trail. Everything led to the Saudi crown prince. It was Erdogan's personal crusade. Well, not anymore. Turkey is halting the trial of Saudi suspects in the Khashoggi murder, and that's not all. They want to transfer this case to Saudi Arabia, and we all know how that ends. Right now, 26 Saudi suspects are being tried in absentia. They're accused in the Khashoggi murder. If Turkey wants, it can continue the proceedings. It can sentence these people. But Erdogan has lost interest. His prosecutors say Riyadh requested to transfer the cases. The next step would be to consult with the Justice Ministry. If the ministry agrees, the trial will end. So what explains this U-turn? What happened to Erdogan, the fiery Saudi critic? Time for another quick flashback, again to 2018. We've prepared a compilation of Erdogan's speeches after Khashoggi's murder, and this should tell you how invested he was. Take a look.
Çünkü burada adaleti arıyoruz.
We are looking for justice here, and this will be revealed in all its naked truth.
Böyle sıradan insanlığın vicdanı.
The international conscience will only be appeased when all those involved, from those who gave orders to those who applied them, have been punished. The Crown Prince's approach, saying that we cannot blame anyone until it is proven complicit, is unacceptable for us.
Cemal Kaşıkçı'nın
Because it happened in Istanbul, we asked for those suspects to be extradited to Turkey.
belgeleri var.
How do you go from that to this? In 2018, Erdogan promised to reveal the naked truth. He wanted to extradite the Saudi suspects. Today, he's winding up the case. In fact, he's going a step ahead. He wants Saudi Arabia to complete the trial. Khashoggi's fiancée has already condemned the move. She says Saudi authorities will do nothing. And she's right. Moving the case to Riyadh is not a legal move, it is a political move. Turkey is officially abandoning the Khashoggi cause. The question is why? What's in it for them? Erdogan's Turkish dreams are collapsing. That's the problem. In 2020, Saudi Arabia imposed an unofficial blockade on Turkey. Turkish goods are stuck at Saudi customs. Saudi tourists are not visiting Turkey. Saudi investors are pulling out. And you know how Gulf politics works. Saudi policy is Gulf policy. So this isolation has hurt Turkey's economy. Inflation is at 54%. The national currency lira is 47% down. Unemployment is at 12%. What's more, Erdogan is up for re-election next year. To revive his economy, he needs to end this isolation. He needs foreign money. So Erdogan has turned up the charm offensive. His officials are holding normalization talks with Egypt. The last round was in September 2021. In February this year, he visited the UAE. He was also supposed to visit Saudi Arabia, but that's when the war broke out in Ukraine. In March, he hosted the Israeli president. With Armenia, he's holding talks to establish relations. Across the board, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is bearing rivalries. His dreams of leading the Ummah have been shelved. But will the Gulf states reciprocate? Well, they certainly have reasons to. Number one, Turkey can help contain multiple conflicts in West Asia, especially Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition is desperate for lethal weapons, and Turkey is a land of drones. Their Bayraktar drones have been a game changer in Ukraine. And reason number two, Iran. An Arab-Turkey axis can forcefully deter Iran's influence, which is why Erdogan changed his position on Israel. At first, he condemned the Abraham Accords, but now he's hosting the Israeli president. And all of this realignment is supposed to help Turkey's economy, help Erdogan stay in power. But consider this. Islamist politics was Erdogan's big populist pitch. A revival of the Ottoman glory days. That's what he promised. He sold that vision to the Turkish people. And now he's backpedaling. So next year at the ballot box, Erdogan faces a moment of reckoning. Will the charged up Turkish electorate stay with him? Or will they blame him for selling fake dreams? Let's talk about technology. The ills of technology, more like. There has been another breach. Apple and Meta could have leaked user data that belongs to you and me. The hackers got really creative this time. They pretended to be law enforcement officials. They approached the tech giants and took personal data of users, all in the name of law enforcement. A new kind of security challenge is now emerging. Hackers are targeting law enforcement agencies to steal data. Our next report tells you why the world should be concerned.
Apple and Meta have been breached. The tech giants gave user data to hackers. Data like customer addresses, phone numbers, and IP addresses was apparently compromised. How many victims? Apple and Meta haven't shared a number, but it could run into thousands. That's because these companies process thousands of emergency requests. In the last 2 years, Meta, the company that owns Facebook, received over 21,000 requests. They complied with 77% of them. Apple got over 1,000 requests. They came from 29 countries. They turned over data in 93% of the cases. The slip-up happened in mid-2021. Apple says it will reach out to law enforcement. Meta claims it has blocked fraudulent requests. So what really happened here? Basically, hackers tried to fool Apple and Meta. The hackers have mastered a new technique to steal data. Instead of hacking big tech, they are hacking law enforcement agencies. The agencies have different ways to get data from tech companies. The most common one is a search warrant or subpoena. This needs the consent of a judge. What if the officials want to bypass the courts? In that case, they can make an emergency data request. Yes, they have that option, but only when there is a life-threatening situation. That's when a law enforcement officer can send an email, explain the case, and the company simply turns over data. Tech giants comply in most cases. Hackers have identified an opportunity here. They know that hacking a tech giant is tough. They have a massive army of coders to build safeguards. This is what hackers do. They first hack into the email system of a police department. Once they are in, they assume the identity of a police officer. Then they forge emergency data requests. They claim there is a potentially dangerous situation and the data needs to be turned over right away. Some hackers have turned this vulnerability into a business. They hack into government emails, crack their passwords, and sell credentials online. The same accounts can then be used to target tech giants and steal data from them. That's how it's done. And this is how hackers advertise their services. Warrant subpoena service. Get law enforcement data from any service. The price? $100 to $250 per request. This is exactly what happened to Apple and Meta. Reports say hackers accessed accounts of multiple law enforcement agencies worldwide. A cyber crime group called Recursion Team is believed to be involved. Its members are apparently teenage hackers. Recursion Team was founded by a 14-year-old. They started hacking law enforcement agencies in January 2021. The group recently disbanded, but the members continue their hacking activities under different names. Some have also organized themselves into a new outfit. Its name is Lapsus. This group has hacked companies like Nvidia, Samsung, Ubisoft, and Microsoft. This month, 7 of its members were arrested by the London police. Big Tech has erased borders. They have also raised security risks. Stealing user data was alarming enough. Now, hackers are going after law enforcement agencies. They are supposed to protect us. But what if they are compromised too? This is a global risk. One that requires the attention of our lawmakers, and not coders sitting in Silicon Valley.
Now, India is the diabetes capital of the world, you know this. But have you ever wondered why? There are 195 countries in the world. Any one of them could have become the diabetes capital. Why not China? It has more people than India. Why not the United States? People surely eat more junk food there than India. Why is India the world's diabetes capital? The answer, we are told, lies in history, India's colonial history. The widespread diabetes may be a colonial legacy, and the British Raj may be the reason why Indians, Bangladeshis and Pakistanis are more susceptible to diabetes and heart diseases. At least that's what experts believe. Let's try to understand why. You see, our body inherits its traits from ancestors, the way it burns fats, for instance, the way it stores nutrients. All of this has a lot to do with our previous generations, what they've passed on to us. Our previous generations were subject to famines, not 1 or 2, but 31, courtesy Britain, 31 famines. The British East India Company anchored its ship in the Indian subcontinent in the year 1611. It ruled India till 1858. Then the Crown took over. They ruled till 1947. Both the Crown and the Company deprived India of basic resources like food. They had discriminatory policies. They neglected agriculture. While food was never scarce, its distribution was discriminatory. The supplies were either sent outside or transported to military warehouses. So an ordinary Indian went to bed hungry. There were famines. Several of them between 1760 and 1943. Reports say at least 85 million people died in these famines in India. The worst one was in Bengal in the year 1943. At least 3 million people are said to have been killed. Those who survived were left physically and mentally scarred. So that's history. Now, experts say there is a link between history and health. They say surviving one famine doubles the risk of diabetes and obesity in the next generation. Surviving one famine also causes diabetes and hyperglycemia in the generations that follow. How many famines were South Asians subjected to over this period of time? 24 in 50 years, 31 if you account for all of the 18th and 19th century. Brown University says surviving one famine increases the risk of cardiovascular diseases by 2.7 times in the grandchildren, 2.7 times more at risk. Again, how many famines were our ancestors subjected to? 31. The starvation scarred their body and health, and the legacy has trickled down generations. The biology is very interesting. Experts say South Asians have the tendency to store fats in their body, meaning our body does not easily burn off fat. That's because our body is quote-unquote starvation adapted. Since there was scarcity of food during the colonial times, Indians, Bangladeshis and Pakistanis became programmed to store fat so that we could go without food for a day or two. This was an evolutionary response, we are told, to the repeated famines. But those days are gone, and so are the British. India is independent, there is food in most of our homes, but our body remains starvation adapted. We store fat despite an assurance of the next meal. So clearly there is a mismatch, and the result of this mismatch is in front of us. South Asians are 6 times more at risk of type 2 diabetes than Europeans. South Asians have to exercise twice as much as Caucasians for the same benefits. At least 72 million people in India are diabetic. 1 in 6 Indian is pre-diabetic. Of course, the role of lifestyle cannot be ruled out altogether, but history is a big contributor here, a contributor that we have ignored for the longest time. How many of you would have thought that colonialism was haunting you or your body even in 2022? Who would have thought that even 75 years after independence, the British Raj would be taking a toll on our health? Our body, according to this research, is still reeling from the effects of colonialism. It is still battling the health inequality forced on South Asians by the British. Turns out the diabetes epidemic in South Asia is, after all, a legacy of the British Raj.
Moscow says that the alleged Ukrainian attack on the fuel depot harms the scope for talks between Russia and Ukraine as negotiations resume. Meanwhile, Kyiv has declined to comment directly on Russian allegations that its forces struck a fuel depot in Belgorod. After the US President Joe Biden ordered the unprecedented release of oil reserves from strategic stockpiles to help ease the crude prices amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Today, I'm authorizing the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months, over 180 million barrels.
This as the US and other countries have barred imports of Russian oil and gas. Pope Francis made a historic apology to the indigenous peoples for the deplorable abuses that they suffered in Canada's church-run residential schools, and said he hoped to visit Canada soon and apologize in person to survivors. Nepal's Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba is on a 3-day visit to India and met with India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar along with Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla in the Indian capital. The visit is likely to help restore bilateral ties. Hundreds of climate activists blocked oil terminals across Britain as part of their campaign to force the government to end its reliance on fossil fuels. The protests began after Britain saw the largest hike in the cost of energy in decades due to record global gas prices. France and India step up naval cooperation as warships from both the nations take part in the first edition of the multinational Indian Ocean Naval Symposium maritime exercise in the Arabian Sea. 11 people died and another 20 were injured after a bus crashed into a cliff in Paraná, Brazil. Authorities say that the bus was carrying more than 30 passengers who were workers from various regions in the country. Malaysia reopens its borders fully, allowing entry without quarantine to travelers who are vaccinated against COVID-19. Daniil Medvedev has missed out on a chance to return to the top of the world rankings. The Russian needed to reach the semifinals of the Miami Masters to overtake 20-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic, but lost in the quarterfinals to defending champion Hubert Hurkacz. Giannis Antetokounmpo has become the all-time leading scorer for NBA franchise Milwaukee Bucks. The Greek freak scored 44 points to guide the reigning NBA champions to an overtime victory for the Brooklyn Nets, and in the process passed the tally of the legendary Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
We're wrapping the show with that, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
هلا يا مرحبا وسا طيبين الفال